I sold all my U.S. stocks recently because I know I've seen this party before. I will repeat that I'm worried.
Jim, thank you very much for joining us today. How are things in Singapore?
I'm delighted to be here, Jimmy. Things are great in Singapore. Things in Singapore are usually great. It's on the equator, so the weather doesn't change much, and the economy is usually great. So far, so good.
I have not had the pleasure of visiting Singapore, but I always hear so many great things about it. You moved there many years ago. Did you move there, I believe, in the early 2000s?
I moved there permanently in 2007. I moved here so my children would speak Mandarin. We tried China, but China's extremely polluted, and Singapore is very easy. Everything works in Singapore. So here we are.
And what is it you enjoy most about Singapore?
Partly that everything works. New York's a wonderful place to live, but it's a very difficult place to live because nothing works. In Singapore, it's a very easy place to live. They have everything that one would want as far as culture is concerned, and it works.
So I want to start off by asking you about Singapore, more specifically Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. He's made a lot of statements about the trade wars and what's happening between the U.S. and other countries. And he actually said what's happening right now with the tariffs are having a seismic change in the global order, signaling the end of a rules-based globalization. What are your thoughts on this, and what do you think of tariffs overall? Are they good or are they bad?
No, tariffs have always been bad for everybody. They sometimes have worked for a short period for some people, but ultimately they usually don't work, and usually they're scrapped everywhere and throughout history. I am not a fan of tariffs. I'm much more in favor of letting people trade and trade and trade, and the world is usually better off if we all trade and drink beer together or tea or whatever we want to drink.
And there's this ongoing debate on who pays for the tariffs, and some people say it's ultimately the consumers. What are your thoughts?
Well, the tariffs are basically a tax because the country receiving the goods pays the tariff, pays the tax, and that's paid by the consumers. I mean, ultimately, and in the end, now that's not the 100% always answer, but that's normally the answer.
And because of where you're situated, you're very close to China. You spent a lot of time there. You know the country and the politics very well. And what's happening in China right now in terms of the economy? How bad are things?
Well, that's an extremely good question. Most places are suffering right now, at least some. Well, I won't say most places, many places in Asia, I should say. And certainly China had a big real estate bubble, which popped, and that's hurt them a bit. And the rest of the world has been cutting back as far as trade is concerned. So China has slowed down, and China did have this huge property bubble, and it has popped. And whenever you have a big real estate bubble and it pops, people suffer for a while. I mean, it's happened in the U.S., it's happened everywhere. And that China still has the hangover from its property bubble.
So there's this back and forth happening between the U.S. and China in terms of the tariffs. And right now, I guess we have a 90-day pause, and both countries are going to try to negotiate and work something out. But do you think the Chinese will, are things bad enough in China that they will be forced to sit down and negotiate some sort of tariff package that's going to be more beneficial for the U.S.? Or do you think they're just going to sit back and take their time? Because they're, as we all know, they're very patient.
Well, you just said it. China traditionally and historically has waited and has been patient and has finally, in the end, I mean, they have had bad times at times, but normally they just wait it out. Now, I am not in Beijing, so I have no idea what they're going to do, but I would suspect that they will. But China China does not want to go through bad times. Nobody does. So I'm sure that if things really get bad, China will do their best to alleviate things. But Jimmy, I cannot speak for Beijing. I have no idea what they're thinking up there.
And one of the reasons why the U.S. has implemented these tariffs is because they want to generate more revenue so they can pay down their debt and lower their deficit. It's currently around 7% of GDP. They want to get it down to 3%. So imposing tariffs is one way to do that. They're going to generate more revenues. And in the past, when you go back to the 1980s, Japan, it was a superpower. They were a big buyer of U.S. debt. And that's how the U.S. was able to fund these deficits. And then moving forward to the early 2000s, then China became that financial superpower, and they were a big buyer of U.S. debt. But now, as we both discussed, China is going through some very onerous times, and they're not able to buy the debt that's required for the U.S. to keep going. Do you think another country such as India will become the new financial superpower? They become the big buyer of U.S. debt?
I hope nobody becomes the buyer of U.S. debt. I hope we don't have such gigantic debt. I mean, the U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. And I sit and look at the numbers and I say, can't they read in Washington? Don't they know what's happening? But to your question, yes, India is certainly changing. It's on the rise for the first time in my investment career. I mean, I've invested in India many times, but for the first time in my investment career, I have the feeling that Delhi, the capital, in Delhi, they understand economics now. They've always given lip service to everything, but I really think the Indians understand that prosperity is good, being rich is good. There's nothing wrong with rich people. And for the first time in my life, I'm extremely interested in investing in it. I've invested in India many times, but I mean, for the first time, I'm really deeply interested because I think that somebody in India finally gets it and they're going to be a real power.
And I want to ask you about Trump now, and I want to get your thoughts. Do you think Trump is a disruptor or do you think he's a transformer? In other words, is he just out for his own greed or does he really truly want to transform the global landscape and create a new world order?
Well, you actually can be both. In my vision, what I read, Mr. Trump, Margaret Thatcher had a deep underlying philosophy that guided her. And if something happened, you could pretty much determine what Margaret Thatcher would do. And there have been many people like that. I don't see that Mr. Trump has too deep an underlying philosophy. If he wakes up every morning, it's not as though I know what he's going to think. He watches TV and decides what to do. Where the wind blows, Mr. Trump often follows. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to do very good things. He's got some extremely good ideas. He wants to disrupt a lot of stuff. And the world needs disrupting, including the U.S. So Mr. Trump could be fabulous. He will certainly surprise me if he comes up with some of these wonderful things that he talks about. I just hope he doesn't ruin us all.
What are some of the better ideas you think he has?
Well, he's talked about, all these military alliances we have, NATO. He keeps saying we got to change all of this, and he's right. I don't know that anybody in America, much less Washington, has thought all this stuff through. More or less, it just happened. And in Washington, if something happens, 30 years later, you're still trying to deal with it because it happened once upon a time. And that is part of the U.S. problem, in my view. And Mr. Trump seems to want to make some basic changes. I hope he can, including the debt, including the taxes. It would be wonderful if we could do something about the debt in the U.S. I mean, I have two young children. The problems they're going to have in their lifetime are going to be like what the British went through in the 60s, when they had the hangover of their debt from 40 or 50 years before. And I'm afraid my kids are going to face a lot of the same consequences.
Maybe you can just elaborate on those consequences. I'm not too familiar with what happened back in the UK during the 60s.
Well, in 1925, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. 50 years later, they were bankrupt. That's not a typo. 1976, the IMF had to bail out Britain because they went bankrupt. They literally couldn't pay their bills. And Britain in that period of time went through exchange controls, strict exchange controls on everybody, in fact. And it was very difficult to do anything in Britain, including have a good time, including travel, because the debt was so onerous and it had built up. Again, they were the richest country in the world 100 years ago. 50 years ago, they were the richest country in the world. And then 50 years ago, they went bankrupt. You remember Margaret Thatcher? Margaret Thatcher came in the 70s, 1979, and she actually did some very good things. But what Margaret Thatcher didn't talk about a lot was 1979 was the year the North Sea oil started flowing. So, Jim, if you give me the largest oil field in this world, I'll show you a very good time. We'll have a very good time. And Margaret Thatcher did a lot of good things, but she came there with the right philosophy, a strong philosophy, but at a time when suddenly they had huge oil revenues.
So let's bring it back to the U.S. now. You're suggesting things could get pretty rough there. And right now, the economy is hanging in pretty good. The last Q1 number we saw, there was it was negative, but a lot of that had to do with the imports. A lot of people were trying to get ahead of these tariffs, okay? So it created a negative tick. But maybe when you look at the Q2, or even when you go back to Q4, the U.S. economy's been doing relatively well. It's hanging in, growing somewhere between 2 to 3%. Inflation seems to be somewhat contained. What are your thoughts on the U.S. economy? And it sounds like you have a lot of concerns about it, but yet when you look at a lot of the data, it's really not all that bad. It looks pretty robust.
The data is great. Everywhere in the world. One of my problems is everybody's having a good time right now. Even Uzbekistan is having a great time. China's a laggard, but they had a real estate huge bubble, which popped, which is hurting them. But most countries in the world, if you look at everywhere, whether it's Canada or Germany or Japan, the Japanese stock market is making all-time highs after being depressed for 35 years. That's not a typo. 35 years the Japanese stock market was in the doldrums. So everybody's doing well right now. And it's great. But how long can it last? My problem is I'm old. I've been around. I've seen all these things happen before. And usually when they have happened in the past, it's time to worry. I hope it's not. Mr. Trump says everything is different now. Hooray.
You and I have had many conversations in the last 5 years or so, and we've talked about these elevated markets and these bubbles that have been happening, and yet it just keeps on going. And the S&P topped out earlier this year at 6,100. It did come under pressure just on the back of the tariffs and the trade wars, went down to the 4,800 level, and then we've had a massive rally since then. Now we're back up to the 5,800, 5,900 level. What are your thoughts on the S&P here and also the NASDAQ? Do you think we take out that previous high of 6,100, or do you think we're going to end up testing that low of 4,800?
Well, I'm the world's worst technician, market timer. So you're asking the wrong person. I sold all my U.S. stocks recently because I've seen this party before. I hope it goes on for 5 more years, but it rarely has. You see a lot of new people coming into the market. You see a lot of new people talking about how much fun it is, how easy it is. It's easy to make money, as you probably know if you read the press. There was it's the internet. Read the internet. You'll find out it's easy to make money. Well, that's great, wonderful. I hope it stays easy to make money for lots of people for the rest of history. Never has, but that would be great if it's going to go on for 100 more years.
One of the things that really fascinates me about this current cycle that we're living through right now is the level of speculation. And I read a stat recently about the number of searches on YouTube for stock trading. It's 5 to 6 million searches a month. But for sports betting, it's 50 to 60 million searches a month. And then when you look at, like, just in the last 5 years, you have all these bubbles happening. Right now, it's AI is the big bubble. It's cryptocurrencies. We've had ICOs, NFTs, the metaverse. There's just one thing after another. What are your thoughts on the level of speculation that's going on right now? And I mentioned sports betting. That's also a form of speculation.
Well, that's good insight that you have, and a very important insight, because historically, when we've had periods like this, and lots of new people have come in and started speculating, and whatever they're speculating in, it is usually ended badly, eventually. I mean, maybe this time is different. Remember, Jimmy, those are very dangerous words. This time it's different. But maybe it is. Maybe it's different this time. I mean, I will repeat that I'm worried. I've seen this party before, and this one worries me.
During the last Fed meeting, the one word that was used a lot was uncertainty. We've heard that a lot here in the last couple of months. But do you think, like, what's going to be the catalyst to take this market lower? Do you think it's going to be uncertainty associated with the economy? Do you think people's confidence levels are just going to be deteriorating to the point where they just stop buying? We get a significant drop in the economy, and therefore maybe a increase in unemployment?
Well, Jimmy, I've heard the word uncertainty all my investment career. I wish it were a new word. I wish there were no uncertainty. No, I would suspect what will happen this time is what's happened before. Somebody is going to sell. Maybe it's you. And the next thing you know, 2 or 3 other people will. And eventually, lots of people will sell. And then we'll all sit around one day in a year or so and look around and say, oh my gosh, the market's down. Everything is down. Look at this. It's a bear market. It's not the first time we've had a bear market. And maybe it'll last a long time. I don't know. But I know that when everything is up and very few people are worried, it usually is that. And if you look around the world, I mean, nearly every stock market in the world is having fun right now. So it's rare in history that everybody in the world is doing well.
Well, I think maybe it is different this time, because one thing we've seen in the last 20 years to 25 years is that the Fed and the government, they just step in and they just keep pumping money into the system. Maybe they just keep doing that.
Well, we've had that happen before. It's never changed anything. It changes things for a while. But even the Fed doesn't have unlimited amounts of money that can save us all. And in fact, if the Fed ever tries to save us all, it usually makes things worse.
So I want to ask you about the 10-year bond. It's been very volatile here in the last few weeks. It went down to 4%. Now we're back to the 450 level. What do you think's happening there? Do you think investors are saying, you know what, because of what's going on in the U.S. economy, we want a higher yield? Do you see rates going to 5% or 5.5%?
I do see rates going higher. I do see that inflation is not ended around the world. And usually when you have inflation anywhere, especially in big countries, it leads to higher interest rates. So I would suspect we will have higher interest rates in the next couple of years.
How high do you see them going?
Oh, I wish I were that smart. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be that smart? I have no idea, but I know certainly higher than 5%.
You mentioned earlier that you started investing in India, and you see a lot of potential there. And a big part of your success has come from investing in emerging markets. What other countries are you looking at now? What other countries do you see a lot of interest or a lot of hope?
Okay. Yes, to clarify, I don't have any investments in India right now. I've started 3 or 4 times in the last few years investing in India, but at the moment, I don't have anything there. You know, I missed this last move. It's not my first time missing something. But as I look around the world, Jimmy, there are not many places. I Yes, China is a good place to invest. I have investments there. They're mainly left over from before, but Uzbekistan is a great place to invest right now. But most people couldn't find it on a map, much less know how to invest there. But if I could put a lot more money in Uzbekistan, I would. But I don't know many markets right now. Jimmy, if you have some, you should give us all hot tips. We need hot tips.
Yeah, I also need some hot tips. But what about Argentina? We have a new government down there. He seems to be making significant progress.
I've read lots of what he's been saying for the last several months. It's very interesting. I've invested in Argentina several times in the last few decades, and it's astonishing, this guy. Unfortunately, I've seen it before in Argentina, but he sounds like one of the best. There have been people coming along in Argentina for 100 years and say, let's do it. And everything is great for a while. And the next thing you know, it collapses into disaster. I don't know if he's different. He sounds different. I don't have investments in Argentina, but if he is as different as he sounds, it may be Argentina's day finally.
It's amazing how these governments come along and they can just destroy entire countries and economies. And you just talked a little bit about Argentina. And if you go back 100 years or 125 years, anybody coming from Europe, they had two choices. They were either going to go to the US or they were going to go to Argentina. And then I believe it was in the early 1900s, you had a socialist government came in and they effectively just destroyed the entire country. It used to be a very strong, robust country. And for the last 100 plus years, it's been anything but.
Well, you've done your research, and you've done your research accurately, and it's good to know. But you're exactly right. I mean, 125 years ago, if you were in Europe and a rich person walked into the room, all the French said, "Oh, God, look, there's an Argentinian," because nobody was as rich as the Argentinians in those days for a variety of reasons. And, of course, it all collapsed, as you point out. They had several periods of being really, really rich. They've also had several periods of total collapse. Right now, they're on the rise again. I don't know. I have no investments in Argentina. I wish I did. You remember, what's her name? The lady, the famous Argentinian.
Peron?
But that was the guy. But he had a wife, a girlfriend, Evita. You remember Evita? Well, Evita was the woman who was winning everything in Argentina and helped ruin it, just like Mr. Peron did.
Well, as you know, I reside in Toronto, and we've had the same thing happen here. We've had a Liberal government for the last 10 years. When the Liberal government came to power in 2015, our GDP was 1.8 trillion. Do you want to guess where it is right now, Jim? 10 years later?
2 trillion.
Yeah,
I don't know.
2.1. It's about 2.1 trillion. So effectively, we've had zero growth for the last 10 years because we've had a Liberal government that's been more focused on implementing social policies, like what's the correct pronoun to use, as opposed to implementing economic policies that are going to push this economy forward and create a higher standard of living for people. But anyhow, I want to ask you now about what's happening in Europe, because we've really had a change of guard. We have a younger generation coming in, a new leader in the UK or in Britain, another new leader in Germany, both young guys. Do you think this younger generation is going to create a new world order, if you will?
Well, that would be wonderful. I've heard about new world orders many times in my life in many countries. I hope they create a new world order, but I hope it's sound. As you know, even Germany has a lot of debt now. Britain has huge debt. Many of the European countries have built up a lot of debt in the last 20 or 30 years. And yes, it'd be wonderful if nobody has to pay the debts. And I know that there is a mindset change in Europe, but there's also lots more debt now. And I don't know how they're going to pay it off. But I don't know how the U.S. are going to pay it off either. I mean, I know this is getting worse for everybody in the world.
I'm sure you saw the news that Warren Buffett is retiring as the CEO of Berkshire. He's still going to stay on as the chairman, but Abel is taking over. He was at the helm for 60 years. What are your thoughts on Warren Buffett stepping down?
Well, I mean, I hope, first of all, I live that long enough so that I can step down when I'm his age. But no, I mean, what choice does he have? I mean, he's a smart guy. He knows he's going to go someday. And his plan is to go ahead and start getting ready for the transition. He doesn't have much choice except to step down. Unless he's going to live to 150. He doesn't have much choice to start stepping down. I hope he lives to 150. That'd be great.
I watched the AGM, and I always like to hear his thoughts, but it's amazing how he's still so very sharp intellectually.
Well, yeah, but and I hope he lives to 150 and is still sharp. But as I say, does he have any choice? If he suddenly died of a heart attack, everybody would say, "Oh gosh, guy stayed too long." And what's going to happen now? No, he has done the right things for the transition. I don't know what else he could do.
And he's currently sitting on over $300 billion in cash. I think 27 or 28% of his portfolio. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I'm sitting on huge amounts of cash too. So for what it's worth, and it's worth nothing, I have exactly the same approach that Warren does right now.
Okay, so let's talk about your investments in your portfolio. You said you have a large cash position. On a percentage basis, how large?
I don't even know. I don't have a committee I have to report to, but I do know it's almost entirely cash, except I do still have shares in China and Uzbekistan, but I sold out of nearly everywhere of stocks.
And Jim, you have always been a big believer in gold and silver. Are you still holding positions?
I own a lot of gold and silver. I bought more silver last week, and I will probably buy more gold I know I will buy more gold if it goes down, and I might even buy more silver if it goes down. I am not a seller of gold and silver. I hope that someday my children have all the gold and silver, because I don't see any reason for any human being to sell gold and silver in the 21st century.
So gold is doing what it should be doing. It keeps making new highs, and it's pulled back a little bit here in the last couple of weeks, but nonetheless, it's done very well in the last couple of years. Silver seems to be lagging big time. Its all-time high was $50 an ounce, and that was set back in 2011. Here we are in 2025, and it's languishing in the low 30s. What are your thoughts on silver? Why is it languishing? Why haven't we taken out that all-time high of $50 an ounce?
Silver also was at 50 in 1980, for what it's worth. So it's been at 50 twice in history. And why is it lagging now? That's an extremely good question. The only thing I can answer is because we don't seem to have an inflation boom. We don't have a commodity bubble or a commodity pop like we did before. I mean, otherwise, I would suspect that silver is going to. I'm a buyer of silver. I said I bought more silver recently, and if you can keep it down, and I can buy some more, and I will.
And so you're buying the physical. What about mining stocks?
No, I don't. I mean, mining stocks are great, spectacular investments if you can do the work and you get it right. I'm too lazy. But if you can find the right mining stocks, you're going to make unbelievable amounts of money. But it takes work. Problem is there are lots of mining stocks out there.
And you said you have a large cash position. I'm assuming that's invested in some sort of short-term bonds?
Yeah, treasury. I have most of my cash in U.S. dollars and in U.S. dollar instruments.
I'm glad you brought up the U.S. dollar, because there's a lot of concern now that the U.S. dollar is under pressure and is going to continue to fall. What are your thoughts on the U.S. dollar? And I'm talking more longer term now because of what's happening in the world. Like if you look out a year, 5 years out.
Well, the people with those concerns are exactly right. U.S. is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. And if you ask me, well, I told you, I own a lot of U.S. dollars. My plan, for what it's worth, is U.S. dollars are going to go up. It's going to have another hurrah. And I'm going to be smart enough to sell my U.S. dollars because I know it's getting closer to the end. I didn't say it was the end yet. I'm just saying it's getting closer to the end because there's so many people who are bullish on the dollar and so many people who are long. And the U.S. debt just, again, I can't believe the people in Washington can't read. I can read. I know what the debt situation is, and it's getting to be staggering. Now, your question should be, okay, where are you going to put the money? And that is the best question of the year for me. I don't know. I don't see a competitor for the U.S. dollar yet, and I don't know where I'll put my money when I sell my U.S. dollars. And that concerns me. It's got to be a place, but you would think it would be the Chinese currency, but the Chinese currency is not convertible. I mean, they're making it convertible slowly, but I mean, the Chinese convertible would be the Chinese currency would be the logical place, but it's not a convertible currency yet. So I don't know. I don't have an answer. If you have an answer, Jimmy, don't say it out loud. Send me an email. Send me a private email.
We were talking about how China's been under pressure here in the last few years, and that economy is very weak. Would you invest in China now?
Well, I'm looking. I haven't found anything. The Chinese had a lot of problems because of property bubble and the COVID virus. Market was down a lot, but I have not found anything that I find suitable yet. I own a lot that I've held left over. I mean, I've had some Chinese shares for 20 or 30 years, but I have not found anything new recently.
You have lived through many cycles, so you have a lot of experience to share. What advice would you give investors right now during these crazy times that we're living through?
Go to the beach. No, I mean, I would just say be very, very careful. I've told you, I've sold out of most markets in the world. Many stock markets around the world have been doing extremely well. My advice is be very, very careful wherever you think about investing. This is a rare time in investing history.
I want to move on now and ask you about your travel plans. You and your wife embarked on an extensive journey back in 1999. You did a trip around the world. You visited 116 different countries, which is a mind-blowing number. But I'm kind of curious. I'm going to put you on the spot now. Like, what were your top 3 countries? The countries you really enjoyed the most, maybe because of the raw natural beauty, maybe because of the people and the culture, the food, what?
Well, that's a very good question. The food, there's a lot of good food out there in the world if you're willing to be diligent. What I was looking, I did it twice. I went around the world in 1990, 91, and 92 on my motorcycle, and that was so much fun. That's why we did it again in 1999 and 2000, 2001. I mean, Jimmy, I grew up in a small town where my phone number was 5. That's not a typo. My phone number was 5. And when you grow up in a town where your phone number is 5, you probably never leave, which is fine. Or you're crazy and you want to see the whole world, like me. I mean, I wanted adventure more than once, and so I set out to find the adventure. And there's some wonderful places out there in the world. They're not all comfortable, but there's some wonderful places in the world. And so I wanted to see it all. I mean, I stayed in some horrible places, which was fine. I ate some strange food, which was fine. But that was the reason to do it, was to see the world. I mean, I crossed the Sahara Desert more than once, which is not easy. There are no roads across the Sahara Desert. But all of this was, because I was this foolish kid from the backwoods of Alabama who wanted to see the world. And I knew that would not be easy. And I did it. And I don't have regrets. I'm happy I'm alive. My main delight is I'm still alive. But, I should be dead. I'm glad I'm not dead. I hasten to tell you.
When was the last time you visited Alabama?
I was there a few weeks ago because there was a wedding or a funeral or something. I still have lots of relatives in Alabama. My parents have died, but I have a couple of brothers that still live there, hundreds of cousins. So I was there not too long ago, and I'm sure I'll be there again. I know I'll be there again sometimes this year or so. And I'm delighted. I am
Well,
not
Jim,
going to
it's
go.
always a pleasure speaking with you. And I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today and sharing your thoughts. And as we wrap up, do you have any last words you'd like to share with the audience?
Be careful. Be very, very careful. Listen closely to Jimmy and be extremely careful because more and more people are getting exuberant and confident, and that often leads to problems. Just be very careful. I hope you all get rich and I hope you all retire young, but be careful.
Very good advice. Jim, once again, thank you.
My pleasure, Jimmy. I hope we do it again sometime.